Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to NEWSROOM. I'm your host Khalid. But today is the 28th of April 2023 and these are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the 8 naval officers from the Indian Navy who are currently in custody since the last 8 months, and they are facing serious espionage charges. They also face a potential death sentence in Qatar. The next sentence will be, of course, on the 3rd of May, and it is on that day that we will know whether the death sentence has been accorded to them or not. They're not the only ones. There are 2 officials from the Qatari government also that have been implicated in this espionage. And of course, the fact remains that apart from 1 or 2 publications that you can see that there's a Tribune, the Wire that highlighted this, not many of the Indian publications are highlighting this, nor are the Indian channels talking about this. The Indian officials are also more or less keeping mum. There's also just a little statement that has come from the Indian External Affairs spokesperson. We'll be discussing that, different aspects of espionage and Indian espionage. We all know because we've dealt with it in the form of Kulbhushan Yadav. Let's come to our second segment that also concerns India, and that concerns the denial of the basic rights to people in India. We've been talking more or less about what is happening in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, what is happening in the rest of India as well. But now what's happening is that intellectual and critics who are criticizing or are against the basic principles or values of the current BJP government are also facing the wrath of this government. Now, West Bengal's Visva Bharati University has issued a notice to Nobel laureate Amartya Sen to voluntarily vacate his ancestral home. This is his ancestral home where he has been living since decades. He's been told to vacate it in the university's campus by the 5th of May, or else he will be forced to vacate this house. This is a house that belongs to Mr. Sen, and this is he has ample proof for that as well. But he says that this is a deliberate persecution because of his principles against the Modi government. This is going to be our second segment. Our third story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the updates as far as the evacuation of the Pakistani nationals from Sudan is concerned. This morning, an aircraft carrying 149 Pakistani nationals evacuated from Sudan arrived in Karachi. There are 2 other flights with about 200 Pakistanis, which will also be arriving more or less at the time that we are doing this show. And one of them originated from Port Sudan, the other from Jeddah, to bring back Pakistanis who had earlier been evacuated there. The Foreign Office also gave a statement as far as that is concerned from the spokesperson, and said they are extremely grateful to many of the governments that have helped Pakistan, especially the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Our last story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Pakistan, that is amongst the 20 countries that is at risk of excessive rainfall. This is according to a report that has been published by the Global Information Early Warning System of the Food and Agriculture Organization, otherwise known as the FAO, that comes under the ambit of the United Nations. Also, all of this is concerned with food security or the lack thereof. And Pakistan is amongst the 20 countries, but there are also 42 other countries that are also on another potential risk. A lot of risk and all of this because of climate change, all of this because a lot of important countries are not following all the pledges that they had made at the different COPs. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns India and the 8 naval officers that have been put behind bars in Qatar because of solid proof that the Qatari government has obtained as far as their involvement in espionage is concerned. To talk more about that, we have been joined by Nasir Ali Khan Sahab. He's a former ambassador and he's here with us in the studios. Nasir Ali Khan Sahab, thank you very much to have joined us. Nasir Ali Khan Sahab, we've all dealt with the Indian espionage in the form of Kulbhushan Yadav and in so many other forms that a lot of times we don't get to know. The fact remains that this whole incident of these 8 naval officers, including Captain Navtil Singh Gill, Captain Birender Kumar Verma, Captain Saurabh Vishisht, Commander Amit Nagpal, Commander Purindu Tiwari, Commander Sugunakar Pakala, Commander Sanjeev Gupta, and Sailor Ragesh, are all behind bars, and they most probably could get the death sentence on the 3rd of May. Isn't this a big embarrassment for India?
Absolutely. You see, India has been trying to project its power first in the Indian Ocean, the Middle East, and of course you know about Quad and AUKUS in the Pacific. But as a result of that, they have many intelligence operations, especially in the Gulf countries, and very often, as you see in this case, they form companies that come and supposedly do business in the Gulf countries. They seem to have a very dubious background. They don't have a lot of experience, and yet they come in with a lot of money and ostensibly either to do business or to have development projects there or to have some kind of training, and very often at the back of it is espionage. And now in this particular case, although right now there are a lot of details that may be missing, but I can see many hints that it is absolutely true that they have been caught doing espionage. One of the reasons is that the personnel that were involved and the company that was involved, not only the CEO, who was an Omani, was also arrested, who was later, before the World Cup, he was released on bail. He was not acquitted. And then secondly, there was a Major General, a Qatari Major General, Khalid al-Ubaidli. He was also arrested. And then the company itself has announced that it will be shutting down. So if there wasn't a serious issue here,
if nothing else, the company would never have shut down.
Would not have shut down. Okay. The other strange thing that you'll see is if you look at the personnel, there are between 75 to 100 Indians working in this company. There are no Arabs, no Pakistanis, and there are maybe 3 women you'll see who are of Russian origin, typically like receptionists or human resource officers or something like that. So there are many things that point towards the fact that they're guilty, not least of which is that if India had not been given the consular access about 15 days later, and then if they had not been confronted with digital evidence, I think by now they would have made a lot of noise everywhere, in the region, in the United Nations, in human rights organizations. But if you notice, their official media has not said much about it.
Their officials are not saying much about it.
Yes, and even the private channels now, since the last 4 months, have stopped talking about it.
You know, the only statement that I see if I go to the Indian website is from the Indian External Affairs Ministry spokesperson, who talks a little bit about we are engaged with the Qatari authorities. Our embassy in Doha continues to remain in touch with the families. The next date of hearing, as he said, we all know, is the 3rd of May. He said, is in May. We are trying to see what can be done that is in connection with that hearing. But nothing, saying that they are not involved or that there is any possibility that these people are innocent, which means directly or indirectly that the Indian government is also accepting the fact that they are part of RAW.
I think the Indian government very well knows that they are. And by the way, even the External Affairs Minister did answer a question in Parliament about this, primarily because the sister of Mr. Tiwari had tweeted and asked for help from the government, and 1 or 2 channels like The Print had taken her interview along with the brother of Mr. Gill, who is another officer. So, because of that, I think finally the government had to make some kind of statement.
Or else they would have pulled it under the rug.
If they did not have, if they weren't given sufficient evidence, or if they were sure that this was not their men, they would have made a much bigger noise about it. They would have put much more pressure on Qatar.
Ambassador Saab, don't the Indians know that Qatar has extremely strict laws when it comes to espionage, when it comes to national security and disclosure of national secrets?
Yes, but you see, there is also a nexus of India with Israel, sharing intelligence. In this case, the accusation is that sensitive information regarding a so-called contract about secret mini submarines that were to be procured from a company in Italy, that was leaked to the Israelis. That is the account that we hear of it. So there has been this nexus between the Israelis and the Indians in terms of sharing intelligence, satellite intelligence. Along the Indian-Pakistani border, they share intelligence, and so it's not inconceivable that they would be helping them in the Middle East. But in answer to your question, don't they fear? Well, there is a huge American naval base in Qatar. So the Americans, who are friends of the Indians, the Israelis, who can also exert influence, will then, allow them to take certain risks.
When you talk of taking risks, do you feel that countries such as Qatar, that are quite independent as far as their whole policy is concerned, will take all of an incident such as this with a pinch of salt? I mean, could come under the influence of, for example, the Americans?
Well, I can only speculate about it, but if I were in the place of the Qataris, I would certainly make it known to everybody, including the Americans, that we are not going to stand for this. This is a matter of national security, you see, and anybody caught red-handed spying, it's not like 1 or 2 people were caught.
No, these are 8 people.
There was a major incident.
And there is definite proof, that is what the Qataris are saying.
They must have enough proof that they arrested in one go 8 people, excluding the other 2. They kept them in solitary confinement, and the first time consular access was granted was about 20 days later. So there must have been enough evidence for them to take this step.
As always, as usual, Indian news agencies are again pointing the fingers at Pakistan. I'd like to quote what ANI reports. And ANI, very well, Ambassador Saab, is an agency that has always, pointed fingers at Pakistan, come what may. Now, sources have told ANI that there is a possibility of the ex-Indian Navy officers being framed by Pakistani intelligence agencies. Your comment on that?
Well, if they were framed, where will the evidence come from? You see, the story that they're trying to sell right now is that they go back to the days of the World Cup of football, and they say that Pakistanis were employed in Qatar during the World Cup to provide security. The armed forces were. So it is conceivable, according to them, that our agencies would also go there and penetrate and do something to try to harm India. The point is, we cannot produce evidence that would be convincing enough for them to actually charge a major general of their own navy, you see. So as far as I'm concerned, this is something that they do all the time, but it's not going to hold water.
Because, speaking of these two, the 2 Qatari officials who've also been arrested include the Qatar head of international military operation, Major Obaidi, that you just mentioned.
Major General.
Major General.
Yes.
Yes, Tariq Khalid Al-Obaidi. And the name has also been made public,
Yes.
Sometimes some countries do not make their officer's name public, but this time his name, as well as the name of the Oman Air Force officer Khamis Al-Ajmi, who is the CEO of Dahra Global, has also been made public. So there is ample proof, in my point of view, and I'm sure you would agree with me, for them to have openly admitted to the people who have been arrested and under which charges they have been arrested. What now? What do you foresee happening on the 3rd of May?
I think on the 3rd of May, it will become quite clear in terms of what charges are going to be framed against these people. And that is what's important, and then everything will come out in the open. But as far as the conduct of Qatar is concerned, obviously they will be alive to the fact that there are certain neighbors, there are certain considerations, and so the final outcome probably will be they will try to use their influence as much as possible to try and tone down if there's a punishment or whatever it is. They will try their best to use their influence in the region because the Saudis are very influential, and their friendship with the Qataris is rather new. And so I'm sure that Qatar will be aware of this and would not want to annoy them.
Let's see because the 3rd is not that far away, it's next week. This said, the Ministry of External Affairs of India says it's making all-out efforts to assist these Indians. Don't you feel there is going to be very soon a major outcry from within India as far as this incident is concerned, or do you feel that all of this will be kept under wraps as far as the reaction from the Indian public is concerned?
I doubt whether the Indian public will have a huge reaction to something like this, but yes, the Indian press will certainly be very vociferous if something like this were to happen, and it would be a great embarrassment for the Indians. I'm sure both the national media, the public media, as well as the private media will kick up a big fuss,
Ambassador Saab, when you look at Indian espionage across the world, and we've seen so many evidence of that around the world, including in Pakistan, do you feel speaking as from a diplomatic point of view, what kind of impact is this going to have on India's relations with Qatar and the Middle East? And B, will India be able to salvage the dust that has, come over its relationship with important countries and its reputation because of this incident?
You see, at the end of the day, today India is the largest population in the world. They have even surpassed China. And therefore, they are also one of the largest markets in the world. Their middle class is something like 400 million. Unfortunately, no matter which country you are dealing with, these economic ties and the potential for trade and investment, etc., is always there. If you look at the case of the Saudi Arabians, they are making major investments with Mr. Mukesh Ambani's company, Reliance, in refineries, and they are a very large buyer of energy and things like that. So at the end of the day, there will be a readjustment, but there'll certainly be a loss of trust, and others will be much more careful, because I know, I have seen with my own eyes incidents even in the UAE where such companies, very suspicious companies, are so-called doing all kinds of projects and have almost unlimited cash. You can clearly see that this is a raw sponsored company which is simply coming in here to be able to get an opportunity to infiltrate important organizations.
What happens to Dara Global Technologies now that it says it's shutting down, and all the employees that have been working under it? I mean, I'm sure they will be paid a severance package, but what about the repute of such a company? Do you feel that it will open another under another name in another country very soon?
No, Dara Global Technologies and Consultancies is not a very old company. It's about 8 or 9 years old, and it also has operations in Oman to some extent. But their operations, they have given notice to their employees. They will not be assisting them with their legal fees, etc. All employees will be sent home, and by the 31st of May, they have said. But as far as their contract with the Qatari government is concerned, I believe there is another company, I don't remember, AJM or something, that is going to take over their contracts.
All right.
And perhaps some of their facilities also. I'm not clear on whether they have some physical machinery at hand, because basically they are a services company that is supposed to provide consultancy services and training to the Qatari Navy.
All right. Ambassador Saab, what I also want to understand is that Pakistan has time and again indicated to different international organizations about India's involvement in Pakistan, and now that we see another case opening up and the Qataris openly, accepting the fact that Indian naval officers were involved in a huge espionage scam that involved Israel as well. Do you feel Pakistan's stand remains vindicated?
Absolutely. It will certainly strengthen our case. When you have other examples with concrete evidence, then it will certainly strengthen our case, because the case of Kulbhushan Yadav, for instance, and many others, we have presented a whole dossier, of documentary evidence about their involvement in Balochistan, in Sindh, and also in KP now.
So and how they are also directly or indirectly involved with what is happening through Afghanistan as well.
Absolutely, yes, of course. Their people are going around with literally briefcases of money, which helps them arm themselves, all kinds of groups that they support, the Balochi insurgencies, the TTP, all kinds of connections that they have over here.
Ambassador, a final question. Do you feel that the revelation that has been made by the Qatari authorities stands as an example for India to be wary of future espionage activities, or do you feel that it will be business as usual in a couple of months or weeks' time?
You see, the intentions, what I mentioned about projection of power, the Indians will not change their course. They also have globally a very powerful ally, which is a partner in the US pivot to the Pacific. So as far as the long-term thing is concerned, their policy will not change. In fact, in some ways, they may even become more aggressive. It's all a question of whether Pakistan is strong enough towards their west. We are their main adversary, and a lot of their policies are in Pakistan centric to some extent. Now, as far as the overall security paradigm of the Indians is concerned, it extends all the way deep inside the Middle East. But the local, regional thing, no matter what they say, they try to lessen the importance of it. But their main adversary is Pakistan. Their main hurdle to their hegemony is Pakistan. All the way in SAARC, it has an effect on Sri Lanka, it has its impact in Nepal. So I don't think that because of this incident that they will, yes, they might be more careful in the future. They might learn a lesson from this failure.
But they won't change their tactics.
No, it's a far bigger scheme. It's a far bigger plan.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador
You're
Nasir Ali
welcome.
Khan Sahab, to have joined us, to have talked to us about this important incident, because I feel it's important from a diplomatic point of view, from a political point of view, and from a regional point of view as well, because of the fact that India, at whichever pretext it gets, has been pointing fingers at Pakistan. So now that we have proof that another country, another Muslim country, has openly stated of what Indians have been doing, that Pakistan should also tell the entire world that what we have been saying has a lot of element of truth to it. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us and to have talked to us about that. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, also concerns India. It concerns the current Indian government's extremist policies towards intellectuals and critics, specifically with respect to Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, who has been told to voluntarily vacate his ancestral home, or else he will be forced to vacate it if it's not done in a couple of days' time. We've been joined by Dr. Asma Shakir Khawaja. She's a Executive Director, CISS in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Dr. Sahiba, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Sahiba, it starts with the Muslims in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, then it goes towards the Muslims all across India, then it transfers to the Sikhs, the Dalits and the Christians in India, and now even those laureates and people who are revered by the Indian society are being targeted just because they do not adhere to the policies of the BJP. To which extent, in your point of view, is this current government willing to move?
Definitely, the ultimate aim of this current government is to become an authoritarian regime where the human rights, public rights, right to know, right to speech, none is being provided or granted to the common man. So definitely, and then this Amrita, what they are doing with Amartya Sen is not an isolated example. It is only a manifestation of Modi regime's intolerance for difference of opinion. And it shows or it reflects that doesn't matter whatever the stature of that personality is, they are not allowed to criticize Modi regime. And I would like to add that Mr. Amartya Sen is a Christian as well. So whatever is happening to him, that is the conduct of Modi regime against minorities, where the majoritarianism is swallowing, is consuming the rights, the legitimacy, the existence of minorities, existence with respect and with all due rights. And the case filed against Amartya Sen is so obnoxious that he has all the legal documents and everything, and still the university is threatening him that they will demolish his house. And
Dr.
for me,
Asma,
it was
not
really
only that,
encouraging that
if you go through the articles, even the administration of the university says that he is not even a Nobel laureate, denies the fact that he is a Nobel laureate, and says that he's been lying about the fact that he's a Nobel laureate. I mean, how low can you stoop?
this shows their trust and faith in fake news. This shows that the Hindutva goons, they believe that whatever they would say, they would become a stark reality, not their assumption or their hallucination. So this is how they want to fool public. But for me, it was really encouraging when the Chief Minister of Bengal, she stated that she will sit outside the house of Mr. Amartya Sen against the oppression of BJP. So if the Hindutva goons and that university administration are so truthful, then why the chief minister of that region, that state, is against it, and why they're not nodding in favor of this decision to only to humiliate this great Nobel laureate. And this is so surprising that how much they believe in false news, in fake news, in propaganda. And I think one day Modi would convert Indian public into a cult, which is just blindly, mindlessly
But it has
following
already,
what
he has
their
already
presidents
converted a
say.
lot of people into that cult, as you yourself have pointed out. And I like the word cult because it is exactly what their policies adhere to. Now, the fact remains that whether it be liberals, whether it be left-wing ideologists, they consider Professor Sen as their supporter. And of course, Professor Sen has never, hidden the fact that he does not support the policies of BJP. We have seen those critics of the BJP government either being shut down one or the other, whether they be human rights activists, whether they be reporters, whether they be journalists, and there's a whole list of them. We've discussed many a times with you, Dr. Saiba, in the past as well. What is the ultimate aim, in your point of view, of this current Modi government? To shut down every single person, whosoever he or she might be, who is even slightly critical of the Modi government?
Yes, the ultimate aim looks like to rule with the fear, to rule India by inculcating false fears against for the government, against the neighbor, creating the insecurity in their mindset, so that Modi can present himself as a messiah. But definitely it is the how authoritarian regimes work. They rule through fear. They inculcate fear in the mind of common man, that if this can be done to Amrita Singh, and why Amrita Singh only? It is Arundhati Roy, it is Rana Ayub, it is Umar Khalid, it is Gori Lankash, it is Navjot Singh Sidhu, it was Shehla Raza, the brave Kashmiri girl who was the union leader of JNU, and she also faced these all these acts. Then Najib Ahmed, then Dr. Kafail Khan. There is long list. Mr. Ravish Kumar is still had to leave his job because of the Modi atrocities. So it is a long list of people, the scholars, which are actually the brain of a society. The Modi regime is trying to shut down because they think that any alternate narrative, they are if whatever Modi regime under BJP is saying that is truth, then why they have so much fear of the truth? Why they want to silence all alternate narratives? As I wrote in one of my research articles, that Modi regime create a bubble of disinformation and vacuum of information, and then fill that vacuum with the disinformation and don't allow any alternate narrative to prosper or even to be heard in Indian society. This again, the biggest example is the presentation of the situation of illegally Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir on the Indian media, whether it is national or it is private or public, because there is no alternate voice you can hear on national media which talks about the plight or the stories of Kashmiri common man. And Mr. Navjot Singh Sidhu, who had faced all those things because he was the first politician who criticized Modi's policies in Kashmir and blamed them for the Pulwama incident. And this is what their own governor is rectifying today. So this is how, but as a student of international security and politics, I believe that history, the truth comes out. When the historians would write the history, they would write that how things were twisted and falsely represented to fool Indian public. And again, this reminds me the BBC documentary, what Modi regime done to the BBC, the international media house. They tried to make an example out of them. They tried
And they continue to do so under one pretext or the other, Dr. Saiba.
Yeah. Exactly, like banning the documentary, income tax raids on BBC offices. So Amrita Singh Sen is an old intellectual which doesn't have such power which BBC enjoys. So if Modi was so illogical while behaving or while treating with, in Pakistan we have also seen there are several documentaries about Pakistan which we don't like as Pakistanis, but our government never behaved with such immaturity to those houses. I still remember the Hollywood TV serials which were made and which represented Pakistan in a wrong lens and in a wrong presentation. But we were not revengeful for those media houses, because if you are mature, you take criticism with maturity, and you
And
don't.
if you are democratic, Dr. Asma, if you follow the democratic norms and principles, only then do you
But this is
criticize,
the
you
problem,
raise an
Omar, that
objection, but you
India is
don't
no
become
more a
vengeful.
democracy.
So what I mean to say is, I mean, plurality or democracy or democratic values have more or less disappeared from India, haven't they?
What you are saying, that is why, because India is no more a democracy. Doesn't matter what international different states they say about, they praise Indian democracy for their political or economic interests. What is vital, that is the research and the outcomes of the reports of international academic institutions which are neither political nor commercial, and they only evaluate countries on certain frameworks of democratic values, and they declare India as a electoral autocracy. So this is what, and then now we can, as analysts, we can see that how India is behaving on all those democratic indicators. Can you believe, or do you think that a democratic regime would do what Modi regime has done to Amartya Sen or the BBC or all other independent voices which dare to provide alternate narrative to Indian public? How can we forget Rahul Gandhi? What Rahul
Of
Gandhi is
course.
facing today. Today, I was reading a news that the Indian government has filed an FIR against, I think, 1,200 Muslims for offering Eid prayer on the streets of UP. So this is a crime for a minority to offer their religious ritual, but but Hindu majority can do all the sermons, the protests, their all religious activities on the streets of their in Indian states, and they are not
And they can demolish any mosque
charged
which they
with
deem
the.
is in the place of any of their old lord or anything, that, I mean, which is more of an imposition of a certain form of philosophy of religion upon the Indian public, a country that has for decades been revered for its independence and independent policy and independent thinking as far as different sects are concerned. But that is now completely changing. You talked about historians, Dr. Asma Shakir Khawaja, a little bit before in this very program. The fact remains that even history is being distorted by certain historians. What would the future generations in India think of what India was and India is?
See, Modi regime is distorting the history by deleting the Mughal Empire and all those contribution of Muslim rule of 1,000 years from the curriculum books of Indian schools and colleges. So they are distorting history. But do you think that this would be helpful in to distort history actually in the long run? No, because all the contributions of Mughal Empire are there. Taj Mahal is there, Lal Killa is there, everything. The road system, the GT road, Grand Trunk Road is there. How can anyone write anything bad about Sher Shah Suri? And the GT road is still there today. Is the biggest medium of transportation. So and then you say yes, the history is been written by the paid historians, but the actual academic historians, their work stays in in the academia, in the libraries, in books, and always available. That is why we use the term truth seeker. Who is truth seeker? So all coming generations, which are critical thinkers and which are truth seekers, they would find the truth in libraries and in the books. So
But the
this
fact
effort
remains,
to
Dr.
distort
Asma, that you
history
talk
is
of critical
always
seekers. The fact
unsuccessful.
is that India will never allow, under this current government, these critical seekers to thrive, to survive. All kinds of independent thinking or even a certain leftist thinking will be completely abolished if this form of government continues for the next few years. Do you agree?
No, I think truth always prevail.
All right.
Despite all government efforts, all subjugation, everything, truth would come out. Because as you were discussing today, what is happening in Qatar. So truth is, I think, brighter than the false propaganda. Like Hitler used to think that he would distort the history and he would paint his own truth, but he was unsuccessful. History known him as a person who committed atrocities and fooled the German public. So this is how history is brutal, and I believe that international academicians would write, when they would write down the history, Modi regime on, especially on political, human rights indicators and democratic indicators, would still they are on downs, they are downsliding on all those indicators, because with every report, Modi government is not learning any lesson to improve their result card. They are still, they cannot prevent the downsliding yet. So unfortunately, and then that is why I always discuss the news about India being the economic superpower, or India being the economic success, a successful country when it comes to economics. I still believe that, especially after the Adani case, that truth would come out, that how Modi created that false bubble of economic success and economic well-being. Definitely, a country which with that much huge population, that is a big economy. Their people have like a large and huge economy, but when you when you see the gap between the haves and have-nots in India, that tells you another story. When you
When you
read
talk
that
of the have and
that
have nots,
that
Dr. Asma, I'd like to, also mention those. On the one hand, we've got those who completely are going towards a one point agenda of following the RSS philosophy and the BJP objective. On the other hand, we've got people who have a certain degree of sanity to them and who want to continue to remain in a country that they can proudly call their own, and a pluralistic and a democratic country. Where you talked about Mamta Banerjee, the chief minister, who said that she is going to do a sit-in if and will refuse to have the house, raised in case any such event happens. We've also got the Bengal's ruling Trinamool Congress leader Tanmoy Ghosh, who's talked to the BBC, and he said that he wants to he showed support to Mr. Sen. Will such voices continue to prevail, or will they become a minority?
already in minority. That is why BJP wins elections. So, but will that minority would have their effect and would play their role in perception building of in Indian public? I doubt it, because right now the charm of Modi, the charm created by the propagandists of Modi, is right now it is more effective, and it is more luring people into BJP trap, especially with the false promises. I hope you still remember the promises of shining India. And as independent thinkers, when we see how Modi regime treated COVID-19 and their policies, so it really looks a very important case study, that how public can be converted into guinea pigs if the government and a political leader aims at. And this reminds me a Hollywood movie, The Tail Wags the Dog. So this what is happening in India, that looks like a perfect example or manifestation what is being what we have seen in that movie.
All right, Dr. Asma, also I'd like to understand this whole fight that is happening, or fight, or this battle between Mr. Sen and the university. Is it between a clash of personalities between the Vice Chancellor, who is pro-BJP, and Mr. Sen, or does it go much, much beyond?
It goes much beyond, because even the vice chancellor, ideally, if he's an academician, he should have immense respect for Amartya Sen. He should not do all these things which doesn't suit to an academician. So because like doctors, like all other professionals, academicians respect each other, they should ideally. But if he is doing all this, that means that he is following someone else's agenda and instructions. Otherwise, true academicians, they don't do that. And this reminds me that how do, if you remember, that recently, few months back, how in Stanford the BJP Hindutva, pro-Hindutva Indian professors, they wrote articles and stopped the seminar or conference, or prevented to this Stanford University to hold a conference on Hindutva ideology. So this is the power of pro-Hindutva academicians all over the world. Recently, I was reading an article that how Hindutva is so much powerful, and an important pro-Hindutva academicians are powerful pressure group in America, even USA. So this is how Modi ideology is seeping in different countries and in different institutions across the globe, not only in India. And it is same as like Nazis. So Nazism, or what we call the Nazi school of thought, that is not only
has found a new home in the form of the BJP government, the BJP policy, the RSS policy, and the current Indian government. Let's see where all of this goes. But for the moment, the future of India as a democracy, as a pluralistic society, is very, very bleak. Thank you so very much, Dr. Asma Shakir Khawaja Sahiba, to have joined us and to have talked to us about the way now critical thinkers in India who do not agree with the policies of the BJP are being targeted. I would refer at the end to Bengal's ruling Trinamool Congress leader Tanmoy Ghosh, who, while talking to the BBC, said that Professor Sen is the pride of India, he's the pride of Bengal, and that the people of Bengal are condemning the actions of the Vice Chancellor. And he also said that the current Vice Chancellor of the university wants to impose the ideology of the BJP government on the university. I sincerely hope that better sense prevails, although I'm not that optimistic as far as that is concerned. Let's come to our last two stories, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let's talk about the evacuation of the Pakistani nationals from Sudan. This is going on since the last few days, and of course our spokesperson of the Foreign Office made a statement as far as the current state of affairs as far as the evacuation of the Pakistanis is concerned. She said this morning an aircraft carrying 149 Pakistani nationals who were evacuated from Sudan arrived in Karachi. Two other flights carrying around 200 Pakistanis are also expected to arrive today. They must be arriving at the time, as I said in the beginning of the show, around the time that we are doing this program. Also, she talked about the evacuation plan that was implemented in phases. In the first phase of the operation, over 800 Pakistanis were transported from Khartoum to Port Sudan. The second phase consists of transporting Pakistani nationals from Port of Sudan to Jeddah to Saudi Arabia, or directly to Pakistan. Today's flights mark the second phase of this whole evacuation process. Also, additional flights are planned, and the Pakistan Air Force and certain other governments are working together with Pakistan's Foreign Office in order to safely evacuate as many Pakistanis as possible from Sudan. The Foreign Office spokesperson also said that we remain engaged with friendly countries in the region and are especially grateful to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for facilitating the process by providing transport by ferry from Port Sudan to Jeddah, and also hosting Pakistani nationals until their repatriation to Pakistan. So, of course, as far as the Pakistani nationals are concerned, things are going in the right direction. They are being evacuated as we speak, and there has been no untoward incident as far as their presence in Sudan or this is concerned. We will end with the news from the weather. as far as Pakistan is concerned. Pakistan is among 20 states that has a risk of excessive rainfall. We've already seen what happened because of this excessive rainfall last year, and this year I hope will be a bit less excessive as far as the rains are concerned. But as far as a report prepared by the Global Information and Early Warning System of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, it says that Pakistan is among these 20 countries that are at risk of excessive rainfall. This is as per the El Nino oceanographic phenomenon forecast that returns in June following 3 years of the La Nina phenomenon. There are also 42 countries that are at risk of the effects of El Nino, with the risk of dry conditions, and of course all of this is going to be related to food security and other issues like disease and so many issues that we have been dealing with since we dealt with these floods because of the excessive rains last year. Hoping for the best, and let's see how the things move along in the next couple of weeks, or whether that report comes out to be true or partly true. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. Today is Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you inshallah on Monday with new stories that pertain to you, us and Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.